Welcome to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. And this show is about Plymouth County real estate. Our headline for the month was "The market slows to the traditional seasonal level, but overall it continues to improve." And you're going to see that in the numbers that we provide in this first segment of the show here. We're talking about a December show reporting on November's numbers. The Registry of Deeds is the county agency that records all documents relating to real estate across the 27 communities of Plymouth County. And our office assigns book and page numbers to recordings. We then image them, create images of them for people to have access to them in the future. We create an index, microfilm them, and send them back to the public. So we're going to do that through a series of bar charts. The first document, you're going to see a bar chart for deeds. So you're going to see that we recorded 725 deeds in November compared to 902 in October. As I said, these things do drift down seasonally and drift up as the weather gets better. 4% more than the 700 deeds in November last year. In year-to-date, through 11 months, we're up 6%, which is obviously a positive sign in the real estate market. The next bar chart you're going to see is of mortgages. There are 1,545 mortgages recorded in November, less than the 1,803 in October, but up 9% compared to last November. Over the first 11 months of 2015, there's been a 26% increase in recorded mortgages. Many of those are for purchase of properties, but also many of those were for people that actually refinanced their properties, got a lower interest rate, and are saving money. We've also had some pretty serious problems in Plymouth County, which has resulted in additional recordings with foreclosure deeds. On the foreclosure deed chart, you'll see there were 53 foreclosure deeds recorded in November, more than the 47 in October, and 39% more than last November. So for 11 months of data, we're 41% higher than last year. Basically what we're seeing is that a lot of the lenders are clearing out their old files and moving forward to take back the property that people haven't been paying their mortgages. The next image you're going to see is a chart for foreclosure notices. Foreclosure notice is the first document we see at the registry showing somebody's in trouble. There were 156 foreclosure notices in November, down from a very high 172 in October. Over the course of the year, that's up 42%. And then you're going to see a listing of foreclosure deeds and notices by communities. Particularly Brockton, Plymouth, and Wareham have been beset by high foreclosure deeds and notice rates. We're going to talk a little bit in the next segment about some changes in the law relative to people that have been foreclosed upon that have certainty in title now, because some people got caught in a situation when a court decision kind of invalidated their title. I invite people to pay attention to and go on our website. We do a monthly training session. Early in January will be our next one. We've done a series of office hours throughout Plymouth County. We just completed one in Scituate. We'll be doing others as we go forward in the future. Again, my great guest coming on the next segment, Richard Serkey, is going to be talking about a very important change in foreclosure laws resulting from that court decision, and ask you to stay tuned for Mr. Serkey's presentation. We'll see you in the next segment.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be?
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck.
So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Welcome back to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. And in this segment of the show, we always try to do something educational in nature. We've had title examiners, we've had real estate appraisers, we've had commercial real estate brokers and others. And I have a great guest on the show today, a person that's visited us in the past, Attorney Richard Serkey of Winokur, Serkey, and Rosenberg. Welcome, Richard.
Jack, thank you very much for having me here again.
Yeah, and we're going to revisit an issue that we talked about not too long ago.
Right.
Something that relates to titles in real estate and certainly combined with some of the issues that we're facing in the market. But first, I'd just like to have you give a little of your background, how you got into law, how you got into this particular firm, and the area of practice that you primarily focus on.
Sure. I graduated from Boston College Law School in 1973. And after I graduated from, actually it was 1974, after I graduated from Boston College Law School, I took a position as an associate with the firm that I'm still with. It was then called Winokur and Winokur. And they needed someone to research zoning laws because of Plymouth's growth spurt at that time. Well, I've stayed since then, and the firm is now Winokur, Serkey, and Rosenberg, and I'm proud to say that I've practiced in that office since I began my legal career in 1974.
That's pretty unusual.
It is unusual, and I feel I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah, that's great. And your area of practice currently?
My area of practice is real estate.
Yeah.
I review every title abstract that our office orders, and I certify and insure titles. I represent people who need relief from zoning boards and committees in various towns. And I also work for title insurance companies that need to have titles fixed.
And in addition to that, you're very active in a professional organization that we know.
That's right. I'm a co-chair of the Title Standards Committee for the Real Estate Bar Association for Massachusetts, which is an organization that promotes the interests of real estate consumers and real estate practitioners of all types.
So in the earlier part of my show, I talked about the resurgence of foreclosure deeds and notices across Plymouth County.
Yes.
It's certainly been a issue in all areas of Massachusetts and across the country for a number of years now.
That's right.
And when we talked on the show last time you were here, we were talking about a very particular issue that had come about based upon a certain court decision. Do you want to refresh everyone's memory about that?
Sure. There was a decision that came down from the land court in 2009 called the Ibanez decision, and it was affirmed in 2011 by the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. And that case held that if a person gave a mortgage to Bank A and Bank B foreclosed on the mortgage later, the foreclosure was void unless there was evidence that Bank A had in fact assigned the mortgage to Bank B before Bank B began the foreclosure process. It seems like a common sense notion that shouldn't surprise anyone, but according to the way real estate practice was being transacted, especially in the years between 2005 and 2010, what often happened was that after Bank B foreclosed on the mortgage, there would then be an assignment from Bank A to Bank B to dot the I's and cross the T's after the fact. Well, the court said, no, you have to do things in the right order. And this after the fact assignment from Bank A to Bank B wouldn't cut the mustard. And as a result, many people who subsequently bought properties that had gone through this foreclosure process found out that the titles to their properties were flawed.
And I know in particular you had a client that couldn't sell, they couldn't refinance.
Yes, I've represented a number of people who find out after they put their property on the market for the first time that the title to their property is flawed because there's a foreclosure in their back title that wasn't done in accordance with the requirements of the Ibanez decision.
Right.
And that can cause great problems for such persons who are totally innocent
Right.
of having done anything wrong themselves.
Right. So I know there was great debate over the whole issue as to some of the people in the organizations that were looking to penalize the banks for the work that they did.
Right.
But also the other side of it, these individuals that bought their homes in good faith purchases.
That's right. There are equities that have to be balanced, as in any case.
Right.
There's no doubt about the fact that a lot of people who had borrowed money and subsequently been foreclosed upon had been the victims of what we call predatory lending.
Right.
They had financed their property at 100% level and had signed promissory notes that had adjustable interest rates, so that when property no longer appreciated and when interest rates were adjusted, they couldn't afford their mortgages anymore. And the banks foreclosed on their mortgages. And there's a considerable amount of sympathy that has to be given to a person who bought property and then subsequently finds out that he's going to be foreclosed upon because he can't afford the mortgage note anymore.
Right.
On the other hand, take the situation of Mr. Jones, who buys property from a bank after the bank has foreclosed upon Mr. Smith's mortgage. And he's totally innocent. He bought the property. He pays his mortgage, and then ultimately decides to put his property on the market to be sold. And at that point, he learns that his property is unmarketable because the title flowed from a foreclosure that was not done in accordance with the Ibanez decision. And Mr. Jones may have had no notice of this because of the fact that he bought his property before the Ibanez decision came down in 2009. So you have the equity of the person whose mortgage was foreclosed upon because he took on a burden he could no longer carry. And on the other hand, you have the equities of the good faith purchaser for value who subsequently bought the property, not knowing that there was a flawed foreclosure in the back title, who can't sell his property because of a problem he didn't create.
So I know there was original legislation passed by the legislature, sent to the governor, Governor Patrick at the time,
Right.
who probably listening to one side of the balance of equity
Yeah.
more than the other, put in some restrictions on it that basically made it unworkable.
Yeah, the conditions that were attached to the bill by the former governor created a waiting period that basically made the bill of little use to my hypothetical Mr. Jones.
Sure.
Now this year, the legislature has basically repassed the same bill with certain minor modifications, and the governor signed it with no such conditions. And what this bill does is, as of January 1, 2017, which is less than 13 months away from now, a property that was foreclosed upon more than 3 years ago without any challenge having been brought will no longer be subject to Ibanez concerns unless they were raised in the interim. I'm speaking generally,
Right.
but that's basically the gist of it. Now, there are certain very important considerations that the bill provides for. First of all, if the foreclosed upon mortgagor is still living in the house, then the conclusive effect of the foreclosure affidavit doesn't obtain. In other words, that person is given protection, notwithstanding the passage of time. Secondly, the bill protects my hypothetical Mr. Jones, who's assumed to be what the bill calls an arm's length purchaser for value. If Mr. Jones is the bank itself that foreclosed upon the mortgage, the bill doesn't protect that kind of a Mr. Jones. Thirdly, even if the time has elapsed for Mr. Smith to challenge the conclusive effect of the foreclosure, he can still have his remedies against the bank if the bank was liable to him for predatory lending or for any other matter. And if the bank has misrepresented anything in the foreclosure process, it can be potentially liable to Mr. Smith under the Consumer Protection Law, Chapter 93A. So the remedies for Mr. Smith are there if he's still living in the property against the property itself, or against the bank in any event, in the event that he has a cause of action against the bank. But what the bill does do is to protect my hypothetical Mr. Jones, who is innocent and whose attorney, when he closed, didn't commit any negligence because he couldn't have been clairvoyant to have foreseen the Ibanez decision. And so I think it cuts a very careful balance between these two competing equities.
And it still gives the original person that was foreclosed upon a relatively long period to file a lawsuit prior to that happening, if that is the case.
That's correct. That's correct. It frees the really innocent purchaser for value to go about his life. And that's what I think the main benefit of this legislation is. I don't question the good faith of the segment of the bar that has been protective of the victims of predatory lending. But I think their compassion also needs to be directed toward that portion of the real estate constituency that are innocent victims of all of this.
So the effectiveness of the statute change, is it going to be felt until January of 2017?
That's correct. The bill gives until January 1 of 2017 for any persons who were the victims of predatory lending, Mr. Smith and my hypothetical, the opportunity to challenge the title to these properties if in fact they feel that's in their best interest. But after that, if more than 3 years have elapsed from the filing of a foreclosure deed affidavit that's otherwise good on its face, then at least the ability to get the property back itself from my hypothetical Mr. Jones will be gone.
So that statute signed by the governor pretty much puts that issue to bed for a while?
It will after January 1,
Right.
2017.
Right.
For people who are caught up in this problem, they often can't wait for a year and a month in order to refinance or sell their homes.
So what happens to them?
Well, they're going to have to continue the effort to try to find my hypothetical Mr. Smith and see if they can get a release deed from him. And if there was a junior mortgage, try to get a discharge of the junior mortgage.
Not Mr. Smith, the person that was foreclosed upon, you mean?
Right. That's my Mr. Smith.
Right.
And often, when you're dealing with a foreclosure that's occurred so long ago, finding Mr. Smith is hard.
They're far away in many
And when you
cases.
find Mr. Smith, he may refuse to cooperate. I've had cases in which they say, I will not cooperate.
Right.
And he may be willing to cooperate, but demand so much money that you can't afford to pay him.
Right.
If Mr. Jones has a title insurance policy protecting his interest as owner, then perhaps he can afford to pay the tribute that Mr. Smith is asking for. But if he doesn't, it's going to have to come out of his own pocket, and that might be hard.
Well, I thank you for coming back
Sure.
to close that issue out. I know we left it as an open question, what would happen in the future. I'm sure there are a lot of people interested and a lot of people that probably didn't understand it to begin with because it's a complicated
It's a very complicated issue, and there are many, many people at the Real Estate Bar Association for Massachusetts and through the Land Title Association and who have worked very hard to try to craft a bill like this that basically offers a reasonable compromise, and they worked hard, and I think their efforts bore fruit.
So in our few minutes remaining, any other issues out there right now that are pending that would clarify some of the title issues that were?
Well, there is legislation that's pending that will try to clear up inconsistencies among the states about how documents are notarized.
Okay.
I'm sure that's an issue that comes across your desk every day.
Right.
We want to establish uniformity, if we can, among the states for how documents are notarized. But some states have very lenient standards as to how documents are notarized. They basically just require the notary to say, I witnessed somebody signing his name. Mm. In Massachusetts, to its credit, requires the notary to do more.
Right.
They have to make sure that the person is the person they claim to be.
Right.
And that they signed it voluntarily.
Right.
And that if it's a statement under oath, that the statements are true to the best of his knowledge and belief.
Yeah.
So we're trying to strike a balance again between uniformity on the one hand without creating a standard that's so weak that it's thin soup.
And in Massachusetts, you have to show some kind of identification. And
That's correct.
Have that right in the notary.
That's
clause.
right. That's right.
Right.
And you have to have some evidence that the person knew what he was signing.
Right. Well,
So we're working on that.
that is a priority.
That's right.
Well, great. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Our time went very quickly.
It certainly did.
Yeah. And as we go forward into next year, maybe later in the year, we'll have a couple other things we can come back and talk about. And,
I hope we'll be able to talk about the recently passed notary bill.
well, let's hope so.
All right.
It's great. Thank you.
Thank
have
you,
a great
Jack.
holiday.
Thank you, and the same to you.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me come on
Yeah.
again.
This message brought to you by FEMA. Be fire safe during the holidays. Only use decorations that are non-flammable or flame retardant. Check holiday lights each year for frayed wires or excessive wear, and do not link more than 3 strands. Never leave a burning candle unattended. Consider using battery-operated flameless candles which look and smell like real candles. If your celebration includes a natural tree, keep it away from any heat source or exit. Water your tree daily to keep it from becoming dry. Learn more at usfa.fema.gov.
So welcome back to the Register's Report. Again, my name is John Buckley. I want to thank attorney Richard Serkey for the tremendous job he did explaining a very complicated title issue relative to post-foreclosure deeds. And he did a great job. He and his organization have been working very hard on that. In this segment of the show, we always try to do something lighter in nature, and particularly with the holiday season upon us, we're going to talk about some of our notable land records. Hanukkah started on the 6th of December, and Christmas is going to be on the 25th, as it always is. You're going to see some images of our notable land record collection related to the holiday season. There's a gentleman from Marshfield who was a great author and historian, Edward Rowe Snow. He wrote many books, including stories about shipwrecks and pirates and the buccaneers of the Atlantic coast, in the lighthouses of New England, but he was also well known for being a flying Santa. Back in those days, people would get up in a small aircraft, fly over the harbor islands, and drop gifts onto the harbor islands, many of which were inaccessible during the winter's months for the lightkeepers' children. And he certainly, in dropping those wrapped gifts, made their Christmas in their lives very sweet. He was a dedicated preservationist and a lover of the harbor islands, and many people credit him with saving Fort Warren, There's a plaque for him on George's Island in recognition for that effort. The next image you're going to see is Reginald Fessenden. Reginald Fessenden was a scientist, basically, who worked in a part of Marshfield known as Brant Rock, and he had a radio tower there. And he broadcast the first transatlantic two-way broadcast in the history of America. He was a Canadian-born engineer, and on Christmas Eve in 1906, he broadcast from that studio the song Silent Night, which was cast all the way to the Caribbean. The tower was well recognized. It is not there anymore. It is still recognized by a plaque. Mr. Fessenden, who had worked for the National Weather Bureau, and Thomas Edison, is certainly well recognized by the town of Marshfield. And finally, as a notable record, James Edgar. James Edgar, who is a Scottish immigrant from Edinburgh, opened a department store in Brockton on Main Street, and he would dress up as characters. He dressed up as George Washington, dressed up as a sea captain, all for the delightment of young children. One year, after a cartoon by the cartoonist Thomas Nass turned Santa Claus into a very jolly-looking fellow, he dressed up as Santa Claus, and people would come from all around Massachusetts, all the way from Boston and up from Providence to see him. And he is known as the first department store Santa Claus. So as you go into Macy's or as you walk around the malls throughout Plymouth County or Boston and you see Santa Claus taking pictures with the children, think of James Edgar, because he was a person that brought it to the forefront. And there's a park in Brockton named after him, and certainly a Christmas parade in Brockton in his honor. There's a Santa hat challenge every year in Brockton in his honor, and worth remembering that the roots are here in Plymouth County and Brockton. So I want to thank Lorna Green Baker from my office, Christine Richards for helping with this show, David Antoine and PAC TV for allowing me to share this information with the people of Plymouth County. It's very important that we let people know about their most important asset, their real estate. And I want to wish everyone a very happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas, and a very happy New Year. And I'll see you in January. Thank you very much.